Hello, I'm Matthew J. Watts, along with my co-host, Ms. Christy Day Shavers, and we're delighted to be back with you with Hope and Help for Families. We've been on a break during the legislative session. We're glad to be back again with a new and fresh program we hope you enjoy. Christy, welcome to the program again today.
Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good. We've got some good stuff to talk about today.
Something's near and dear to my heart, as a matter of fact.
Fatherhood.
Fatherhood.
You would be pretty much an expert in that, having 5 children of your own and grandchildren also.
I don't consider myself an expert. I'm a work in progress, and so I'm getting a lot of practice these days with my own 5 children, and one of them is an adult, 3 teenagers, and one is getting ready to go into the teen years. And of course, I'm really excited about my 2 grandchildren, my granddaughter and my grandson. I may get an opportunity to correct some of the mistakes I made with my own children.
Well, good luck. This is very interesting what Hope is dealing with right now, which is a nonprofit organization. You're the executive director of that, Reverend Watts, and that is a fatherhood initiative that really targets a serious need in our community. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's an initiative that's been on the drawing board for some time, and it was kind of born out of my own experience and the experiences of some of the people on my staff. You know, I was born in a single female-headed household, and my father was in the community, but we didn't have a lot of contact when I was growing up as a young boy. I mean, he had another family that he had to raise, but fortunately I did know that my father cared about me. That was always a given, and I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. And to be honest with you, for my entire life, there was somewhat of a void, an emptiness that was there of not being connected with my father the way I would like to have been. And but by the grace of God, you know, toward the end of his life, he and I spent a lot of time together, and we were able to talk about a lot of things. We had a wonderful relationship before he passed away. But until this day, I really feel like I missed something because he had so much to offer. He was skilled and gifted in so many different ways. And because I didn't get the opportunity to spend the time with him, he was unable to pass that information on to me. And so I feel very strongly that it's very important that we try to help fathers connect with their children, to be the positive role models and influences that fathers need to be.
And the reason this is, of course, such a need in our communities now is because, of course, we're seeing skyrocketing teen pregnancy rates. We're seeing a large number of divorced households. More than, or at least 50, maybe more than 50% of marriages end in divorce, as we're told by various studies. And of course, this means that male role models, male figures, are removed oftentimes from children's lives, and that has a dramatic impact on them.
That's correct. I think all of the studies now are showing that children who do not have a positive relationship with their father and positive input from their father are much more likely to be involved in at-risk behavior, drugs, alcohol, smoking, premarital sex, and even to get involved in the juvenile justice system. There have been a number of studies that's done that shows that a very high percentage of men and women that in our criminal justice system were often young people that either did not have a relationship with their father at all or had a very tumultuous relationship with their father. And so what we're finding out that fathers really do matter, and fathers really do count. And for years, we were operating under a paradigm that said that if we have a single mother, if we provide her with welfare benefits, housing, basic assistance, medical care, that she can raise the children by herself. And mothers are doing tremendous jobs. They're doing yeoman work. And being a product of a single female household myself, I testify to the sacrifices that mothers have made. But the statistics seem to show that when fathers are involved, the child has a much better shot at a successful life.
Now, speaking from my own experience, I too was raised in a single-parent home, but my father was very much a part of my life. My mother and father divorced when I was very young, but I was daddy's girl, you know, and my father and I have a very strong relationship, and I never doubted how much he loved me, and that was very, very important to me. But with the number of children that you deal with, what do they tell you is missing when they don't have that relationship? What is it that they express to you?
Well, some of the young people have expressed to me an anger and a real bitterness. They feel like they have been robbed. I had a conversation with some young men. These are young adult men that are like between 25 and 28, 29 years of age. And they still say there is a hole in their heart they feel like they were robbed, that their fathers robbed them or the mothers robbed them, whoever it was that was responsible for the father not being involved in their lives. We work with some youth that are juveniles, and many of them express anger and hurt over the fact that their father's not involved in their life. Some of them don't even know who their fathers are. Others have fathers who are incarcerated, and so there's a tremendous amount of guilt and shame associated with that. Others have fathers who are in the community who have substance abuse problems, and that's also, there's some guilt and embarrassment associated with that. And so by and large, many of the young people who are not connected with their father in a positive way express hurt, disappointment, in some cases bitterness and anger, and a sense of loss.
But what you are doing now is taking this situation, looking at this situation, and then trying to build a model that you can help people who have dealt with this to not repeat the vicious cycle. Is that what we're talking about?
That's correct, Christy. Mothers normally are naturally bonded to their children. They've carried the child in their womb for 9 months. They've felt the child growing inside of them and kicking and so forth. The child is naturally bonded to the mother because the child has heard the mother's voice for that period of time. There's a natural bonding that takes place. But in many cases, fathers are not bonding with their children. If they're not married to the mother, that means that they're not a part of that prenatal period and the pregnancy, and so that bond doesn't really take place. And so that natural bond doesn't happen. And in many cases, men just aren't as skilled and gifted at establishing relationships as many women are. And so we often just don't know how to do it. We don't know how to connect with our children after they get up to be some size. And it's hard for us to do. And what we want to do is to try to help men learn some skills and some techniques whereby they can communicate with their children, establish a relationship with their children, and have a meaningful, positive impact in their children's lives.
So how is it that you become involved in these young lives, often young lives, I should say? I know you work with young men and men between the ages of 16 and 30, but how do you initially become involved in their lives from the beginning?
Well, through a variety of ways. One is through the Hope Youth Development Movement in partnership with the Kanawha County Workforce Investment Board. And that program targets young people between the ages of 14 and 21 that are low income and then meet certain other income eligibility criteria. And so what we found is that there are many young women, at least 8 to 10, that are young mothers, and their fathers, the fathers of their children, are not in the program. And then there are young men, about 8 or 10 of them, who have fathered children. And so by virtue of these young people being in the Hope Youth Development Movement, and we find out they have children already, it gives us an opportunity to start working with them and talking to them about how important it is for them to try to be a good father to their child and to have a positive impact and relationship with their child. And then we have other people that come into our program through various other means, whether through looking for employment or people coming out of incarceration and trying to reestablish in the community. And very often in these men's heart is a desire to reconnect with their children. They just don't know how to do it.
And a lot of times, a term which was coined back in the 80s, I believe, was male bashing, you know, and some of the movies that came out, we would talk about brothers ain't this, or whatever the case may be, just to use some of the slang that was out there. It seems like that is some of the stereotype that you even have to get beyond, because at this point where it begins, there's a lot of hurt feelings, as you say. And sometimes I think what happens with men particularly is they live up to that expectation. Well, they say I'm not XYZ, so I don't have any shoes to fill, so I'm just going to behave in that manner. Do you kind of set the bar and say this is what's expected?
Yes, we tell fathers that there's no more important role that you can ever assume, that there's no title any more important that you could ever have than that of daddy or father, and that you have an opportunity to touch this world in a very special and unique way by giving your child every advantage that you can for them to reach their full potential. And don't let anyone take that away from you. I mean, fight the good fight to be a positive influence in your child's life, to provide for your child whatever meager substance that you can provide, but to be there to let them know that you really care and that you really want to see them be successful and have a productive life. But I think you're right. Sometimes the Pygmalion effect, the law of the self-fulfilling prophecy, does indeed set in. And I think even with some of our social policy, as well intended as they might have been, they've helped to further undermine the role of the father. As I said earlier, with our social welfare program and aid to families with dependent children, it was much easier for a woman to get welfare benefits if she said she didn't know who the father was, or if she said she didn't know where the father was. Because if she knew who he was and where he was, then she had some obligation to file a petition to have him arrested for non-support. And so in a lot of ways, that drove men away, from their children. And it made it much more difficult for men with meager means to be involved in their children's lives. I don't think that was the intent of the social welfare system, but that was indeed one of the consequences. And so these men often referred to as deadbeat dads, as being sort of the offscouring of the earth. And there's a lot of hurt in a lot of men's hearts about the way they have been stereotyped. Many of them basically have had a difficult road to hoe. And in other cases, many haven't been as responsible as they should have been. But what we're saying is, regardless of what they have not done in the past, is that if we can help them to be more positive fathers in the present and in the future, then we have served their children, and we've also served the society, and hopefully helping to produce better citizens.
So where does this all begin? I mean, I imagine there's some counseling that has to go on. If a father's been removed from his child's life for an extended amount of time, I imagine there's some counseling that has to go on independent of the child, just with the father, before you reintroduce them back into that child's life.
Yeah, this is not an easy proposition, because very often there are strained relations between the father and the mother. And so it often requires someone working with the mother, another female working with her, to where she would be open to this man coming back into her life, because the man comes back into the child's life indirectly, he's also back into her life. And so that conversation has to be had. I mean, is she open to it? Is she willing to allow this to take place? And then the conversation has to be had with the father about his willingness to really put forth the effort, and to realize that you may have to put forth a little bit more effort to earn the respect and to earn and show yourself worthy of the opportunity to have an active role back in your child's life again. And again, it's not always easy. It's sometimes much easier with the younger fathers and the younger mothers before the relationships become greatly strained and a lot of tension, hostility, either bitterness, and even bitterness set in, to get them to see that it's in your best interest that you be civil toward each other, so that you can raise a well-rounded child that will be healthy, feel good about him or herself, and have love for both her father and mother.
We spoke a little bit about this on one of our other shows, but also that the age of people that you're dealing with, of course we said 16 to 30, but some of the mothers can be as young as 14 years old or in 9th grade. And that's just absolutely shocking.
Yeah, it is. It's a problem that we don't like to talk a whole lot about, but the problem of teenage pregnancy is one that we've got to continue to try to address in our state, because we have one of the higher teen pregnancy birth rates in the nation. And we have some young women in our program that they're in the 9th grade and they have children. And they're still just little girls, yet they're also mothers. And we have ladies that on our staff that work with them to mentor them, to try to encourage them to continue to pursue their education. As a matter of fact, we're in the development stages now of a motherhood initiative. Even though these things have been going on informally, we're trying to systematize them and codify them in a program to where we can recruit in other volunteers who want to participate. But really just trying to nurture them to stay on task and to really stay in school. And again, with the young fathers, the same thing. We're trying to get them to realize that for you to continue your education is an investment not only in your future, but also an investment in your child's future. You will have a much higher earning potential, and you will be able to do more for your child, by continuing your education. And you also will set the right example for your child, when you tell them about the importance of education, when you've completed your education, then you become, really your best advocate and example of why it's so important. And so we're trying to start, with the younger parents because we think we have a better opportunity to impact them. And they're also at that critical stage of their life. If they don't complete their education, then it's going to be difficult for them to provide the quality of life for their children that their children will need to thrive in our very competitive society today.
As one of the religious leaders in our area, Reverend Watts, interested because I know the criticism that's launched often is because you are dealing with these situations and the manner in which you're dealing with them doesn't mean that you're giving the okay to certain kinds of behavior. I mean, because right now what we're talking about is pregnancy out of wedlock, and as a leader of a church, I know that you believe in abstinence until marriage. So how do you get across both of those messages? Because it's an activity that these young people are engaged in.
Very delicately and with great compassion. Young people need encouragement. They need compassion. They need to know that even though they have made a mistake, that all isn't lost, that there are people who still care and people still willing to work with them. I mean, we state clearly where we stand in terms of we believe that we really have a moral crisis on our hands and that many of the problems that we are facing in our society is directly linked to immorality, whether it's sexual immorality, whether it's dishonesty, whether it's greed, whether it's stealing, or what have you. That there is indeed a moral crisis, and so we try to challenge the young people to a high moral standard in terms of what we believe to be right and the better life choices. But at the same time, we recognize that people are where they are, and they're in the situations that they're in, and that we have a better chance to bring them up to a higher plane of living by reaching down to try to help them, rather than stepping on them while they're down. Normally, people know when they've done wrong. They know when they've made a mistake. And what they need to know, is there hope for me? Is there a way for me to get out of this dilemma that I find myself in? And so we try to continue to work with the young person as long as they're willing to put forth some effort to show them there is a better life and there's a better way.
I know that, for example, in college, one friend that I know who had a child before she graduated and she was not married, it seemed to give her more incentive. I mean, it seemed to give her, not whether it was right, whether it was wrong, no one's pointing fingers, but it seemed to give her that encouragement, and she became a much better student. Not saying that's what you want to do, but I'm just saying how that affected her life. Do you find that some of the young men that you're dealing with, this is what they are using as a reason to live a more productive life?
Some. To be honest with you, I think we find the young women more apt to adapt that mindset. And we're trying to challenge young men to embrace that mindset. Again, there are some things that we've done in our society and we meant well, but I think we have undermined manhood for some men. There was a time when the true test of a man's character and his integrity and whether or not he was a good man was he sacrificing to provide for his family. And if he was not sacrificing to provide for his family and taking care of home, then it didn't matter what stature that he would attain in life. We did not look upon him very favorably. That's no longer the case. We no longer hold being a husband or being a father in high esteem in our society. And so young people are picking up on these cues to say, well, society really doesn't value that as being really that important. And we're trying to say, but it really is important. It's important to the society whether society values it or not. And so we're trying to do exactly what you said. We're trying to motivate young men to say, now you have a reason to get your education, to be gainfully employed. You have a child that needs you and that's dependent upon you, and you have an opportunity to do right by your child.
I know the program is right now in its infancy. What kind of measures do you have out there? I mean, how do you measure success for something like this if you have two men or one man or one young man who's turned his life around? I mean, how do you measure that?
Well, on this particular program, I think one of the ways we measure the success will be after a year, of the young men that are in the initiative, how many of them are still involved with in the life of their child? And that's really the way we will measure it. You know, are they still involved with in the life of their child? Are they still doing things with them? Are they providing some of their support? That's one of the things we really emphasize, that if you make a dollar, then you have some obligation to give that mother part of that dollar to help with the support of your child. And so we'll be measuring based on that, really their involvement and their willingness to help provide support if they have the means to do that.
One thing that just really always sticks out in my mind, particularly when you're talking about young people, as I have 2 children myself, and it's myself and my husband, and it's like another job. I mean, it's like a full-time job just trying to care for your family. So sometimes I can see that it may be easier in the short run for these young fathers to just be very terrified of that obligation, although, you know, the child is already here, so someone's got to take care of it. But sometimes it would seem like it would be hard to get them to that mindset when they haven't been there before.
Sure, and it isn't easy, particularly if they have not had models, if they didn't see their father modeling it, or an uncle or close relatives modeling it, if they haven't heard other men talk about the reward and talk about the sense of satisfaction, you know, of being a father, and the joy of seeing their child grow and mature and be successful. And what we try to share with them is that, you know, this is the best that you would probably do in life. You know, the best any species can do is to reproduce after themselves. And then the better you can do is to help that offspring to develop and exceed you and eclipse anything that you've done. And I tell young people that you have an opportunity to ensure that a part of you will be in the future through your children. And we talk to them about, think this thing through. What if your child grows up to be a juvenile delinquent, or your child grows up to be a murderer, or your child grows up to do something really bad? How will you feel about it if you know that you didn't do what you could do? Will you not feel some guilt that maybe had I been involved, I could have helped steer my child away from that type of deviant behavior? And we try to help them kind of think things through, to realize that what you do today that may appear to be a sacrifice is really an investment in the life of your child for tomorrow, and that you receive a return on your investment when you see your child do well. And we try to tell them there's no greater joy, you know, that you can experience in this life than to see your children do well and to know that you had a hand in that.
One thing that we talked about a little earlier before the show began was that in our own experiences growing up in small rural communities, I'm from London, West Virginia, which is right up the river. You're from
the metropolis of Mount Hope, West Virginia.
The metropolis of Mount Hope. And so we had a different experience in that the extended family was there.
Yes.
And Miss Robinson across the street could beat you behind if you were misbehaving, just as your mother could. Sure. The community engaged in raising the children, and not only that, but also the role of the church. You were expected to be in church, of course, on Sunday and throughout the week. And so there were other activities that were going on that were very productive. Also, Little League football and those kinds of things that always provided activities, and that the community got involved in getting their children active in also. Sure. However, that structure has crumbled significantly.
That's correct. You're so accurate historically. You could go all the way back to slavery. I mean, for African American people, the slave plantation was an extended family, and it was on that slave plantation where the church was born, and the church became an extended family. And so within the African American community, there was a nurturing of the children, an extended family, this transcendent commitment to the raising and rearing of children. I'm a little older than you are, and so I went to grammar school in segregated schools. And the teachers that I had in elementary school, Miss Gladys Willer, Miss Elise Watkins, and Miss Marion Anderson, they also were my teachers in Sunday school. And so they had this double opportunity to impact my life. But I can remember growing up, my oldest brother, who was killed when he was 17 years of age in a car accident, and I was 9 years of age, he was my hero then, and no one has ever been able to replace him to this day. I mean, he put a love for sports in me and for academics, and he was a good person. And after his death, I wanted to be a better person, to be more like him. But there was one man in particular that had a tremendous impact on me. His name was Mr. Edward Penn. He was a disabled coal miner. We lived in the projects in what was called Stadium Terrace. And when we moved in there, the project in 1963, the little duplex abutted his apartment. He had fathered 14 children, and about 8 or 9 of them were still living at home when we moved in there. And he became my role model of what it meant to be a father. Even though he was unable to work, he got up every day. He was a Mr. Fix-It. He was working on things, fixing things. He would go to the junkyard and get old toys and different things and bring them and repair them, and they became the community toys. And I looked at the respect that his children had for him and the stature he had in the community. And the reason he had such stature was because he was a good husband and he was a good father. And it was watching him as what made me want to become a father and to be a husband. And to this day, I often remember Mr. Penn, that every day was like Christmas for us at the community because of him.
And of course, what we're looking at in terms of role models these days has changed significantly. Yes. Because those male figures aren't there. So some children go in search of who to emulate. And unfortunately, because of the preponderance of negative images in various medium, they are making some very bad decisions.
Exactly. I mean, we continue to parade before young people, sports stars and entertainers, and people of high stature. They are celebrities, is what I tell young people. They are celebrities. They cannot be your role model, because your role model is someone you have to know them. And you have to see how they live every single day, and how they handle pressure, and how they handle disappointment and setbacks. A role model is someone you must see their true character of what they made out of. Then you can determine as to whether or not there's someone that you can emulate. And so we're saying to the community, to the faith community, and to people who want to volunteer, that we must be the role models that our children need. And we must be touching their lives daily so they can see how we deal with the pressures and the uncertainties of life.
I know we're running out of time here, but I'm just trying to get an idea of where this whole thing is breaking down, because I know when I sit in the group of women and we like to sit around drinking coffee and talking about today's issues and problems, and you know, they're always talking about, well, this is what a good man is. And a good man seems to always be described as this person who cares for his community and for himself and would treat this woman like a queen. So is this kind of like a boot training for this next generation of good men, or what?
You know, we hope so. You know, a few years ago, the United States Marine Corps had a slogan that Marine is looking for a few good men. You know, and we hope so. We hope that we can train up some gentlemen who will know how to treat women with dignity and with respect and with the elegance and grace that they deserve. And they will see themselves as those who are called to provide and to protect, and to take care of the women and the children, not in an authoritarian role of a dictator, but as a servant leader. That's our goal, to raise up servant leaders.
All right, well, on behalf of women and sisters everywhere, amen.
Thanks again for tuning in to Hope and Helpful Family. This is Reverend Matthew Watts along with Miss Christy Day. Hope to see you next time.